I like the background, Michael. Is that mountains?
Nice. Well, I think we can get started. I appreciate everyone that has joined our broadcast today. And I want to welcome you to today's session about migrating applications from PCF to Anthos. I'm Michael Kennedy. I'm an architect here at Arctiq, a services firm out of Canada. We're here today with a couple of other team members. We've got Chris. We've got Ron from Softchoice. And we've got Rohit from Google. And Michael Baker was scheduled to join us today, but was unfortunately unable to. We are here because we're excited about the possibilities of migrating applications to Anthos. And Kubernetes has become the de facto standard. Footprint is growing as the adoption of public and hybrid cloud solutions happens in the industry. And some older platforms are falling behind, and they have a fragmented vision of the future. And in some cases, their longevity is uncertain. Rewriting applications is expensive. Managing change at scale is challenging. And so Softchoice and Arctiq have partnered with Google, and we all agree that Anthos is a sound choice for managing your workload in the future. Anthos enables enterprises to manage and orchestrate fleets in a scalable and flexible manner. And additionally, Anthos KF provides a low-friction migration pathway for PCF applications, Cloud Foundry applications, while maintaining your existing workflows and developer experience. And today, we're going to explain how this works. Rohit's going to give us some background on the KF platform and how it helps. Chris is going to do a demonstration. And then Ron's going to lead a panel where we answer your questions about what's possible. And with that, Rohit, would you like to share with the team what's been happening at Google with the KF platform?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Rohit Kelapure. I'm an app modernization GTM practice lead at Google. Have been working with Anthos and with the KF project for the past couple of years. The core value proposition here is that Cloud Foundry as a technology was path breaking in terms of its developer experience that was offered about 3-4 years back. It modeled after the Heroku paradigm, and so as a platform as a service, Cloud Foundry as a technology was fantastic. But over the years, what has happened is that as time has gone on, other platforms have risen up and have provided a similar level of developer experience. And Cloud Foundry, as a core technology, has kind of entered its sunset phase. The developer experience is still great, right? Developers do love that. And what we have seen is Pivotal Cloud Foundry and Tanzu application service, the commercial distributions of Cloud Foundry have don't have a natural path for migration on top of Kubernetes. A lot of the open source projects, and even there is no path for PCF applications or for Tanzu application service applications to be rebased or run on top of Kubernetes. We have recognized that gap, and we have customers who came to us with a core need to run their Pivotal Cloud Foundry applications on top of GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, or Anthos. Now, why does this make sense? When we created a tool, and a project called KF that provides the same developer experience that Cloud Foundry provides, with the exact same set of abstractions, with the container runtime of Kubernetes, right? So the bottom line is KF, the tool, provides that on ramp for running Cloud Foundry applications, Pivotal Cloud Foundry applications, on top of a native Kubernetes runtime. In fact, the top container runtime, which is Google Kubernetes Engine, you get the developer experience of Cloud Foundry with the operational efficiency of Google Kubernetes Engine or Anthos. You get the best of both worlds, right? And so this addresses a core customer need for both the VP of apps, the developers, the senior architects, and the folks that run the IT side of the business. And if you dig deeper into KF, it's a tool, it's an operator, it's on the developer side. It basically replaces CF push with KF push, and the operator side, it's an operator that runs on top of Kubernetes, right? So the it supports the developer workflow. All of the It has compatibility with the cloud controller command line. It builds natively on top of Kubernetes, and not only does it support the stateless apps, it also has support for migrating data with your service brokers. So even service brokers, persistent file systems, we have looked at all the edge cases, not only for stateless but also stateful workloads. So it's a complete replacement, a compatibility layer. Think of an anti-corruption layer for your PCF applications on top of Kubernetes. So I'm going to give it back to Chris, who's going to do a demo of some of the capabilities, and then we'll come back to Q&A at the end. Chris, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rohit. I'm going to be doing a demo that covers a lot of what Rohit just talked about with regards to Cloud Foundry and KF and how KF fits into play here. Just a quick little background. My name's Chris Markieta. I'm a consultant at Arctiq, and I've been with Arctiq for over 3 years now. And I love doing a lot of these hands-on sorts of demos and working with Kubernetes and Google Cloud and a lot of other different DevOps type of tooling and environments. So in this environment, I'm going to be showing you, first off, my development, a Cloud Foundry environment. I am using Bosch Lite here. For those that are not familiar, Bosch Lite is a very easy way for developers to essentially test out Cloud Foundry on a laptop or a desktop. And I'm using this environment with some sample applications you see here that I'm going to be using as my source for my migration to a KF cluster. So here I have a few different apps. I'm using specifically Spring Boot, the Spring Music application, which a lot of Cloud Foundry users are familiar with. I'm going to be using this as my target for migration. And as you can see here, it's built with the CF Linux FS3 stack. And I'm going to be using that stack as well when I'm building this in Kubernetes. I have a Kubernetes engine cluster here, a GKE cluster for short, which is Kubernetes running on Google Cloud. This cluster is just a very basic GKE cluster, but it has the KF tooling and utilities to run some of these different KF applications. So I can run your Cloud Foundry apps the same way you would on Cloud Foundry, but now using this Kubernetes backing. So I have a few apps that we don't really need to get into, but this is just to make KF work as a processing cluster here in GKE. And I'm going to be using a Anthos service mesh with an Istio ingress gateway to expose the routes for those applications, right? So when we're doing all of these things from the command line, I'll be doing this using KF commands, but you're with CF commands like CF push or CF spaces here. Likewise, when you're doing this in KF, the syntax is very much the same. You just use K instead of C. So KF spaces, or in this case, I'm going to look at the different stacks that are running on my Cloud Foundry instance versus the stacks that are running in my Kubernetes, my KF instance. So in here, I'm just going to create a sample test space, just like you would in Cloud Foundry. And you'll see that if I do the stacks now, I've got the I've got the test space first of all, and if I do the target and say I want to target this space as my default space, you'll see that I've got the no apps running in there yet, and I'm going to then take the apps that I'm running in Cloud Foundry, or one specifically, the Spring Music app, and I want to bring that over. So To do that, I use a command to start with called migrate kf migrate scan. What this is going to do is it's going to scan the existing Cloud Foundry cluster, which is going to be, well, this is the syntax that it's going to be, and it's going to produce an Excel spreadsheet file for me. And so when I do that, it's just going to target my basic CF context, which is the Cloud Foundry instance running on my local machine. It's going to bring me back some information in this report. And now I can see a bunch of different details about the apps, the routes, the actual system it's running, some of the different information about what is running in CF, how does that compare to my KF environment, what do I need to worry about that is maybe incompatible or that needs to be updated to satisfy the Kubernetes world. Other things like, what sorts of stacks were used and build packs used to build all those apps, what organizations and spaces or domains, and all the different apps we have listed that are exposed to me via my current credentials in Cloud Foundry. So as you can see here, I've got the whole list of apps I've shown you before, and I'm just going to migrate this Spring Music app using the KF command line tool. So the way I do that is by using a command called kf migrate plan, and then that's going to generate a plan for me. That's going to create a little YAML file, and I'm going to specifically say, I want to deal with my system organization, the MySpace space, and it's going to generate a file that gives me all of the applications in the MySpace space. In there, I'm going to take specifically Spring Music and generate this migration plan, essentially. So once I do that, I got a YAML file. And this YAML file is going to have some things in there that I want to update before I perform the migration to GKE. So a few things such as renaming the routes, changing the number of instances, which if you're familiar with Kubernetes, this is like replicas, the number of pods we want to bring up, or the number of container instances. And the destination routes that we're going to be using, I just want Spring Music here. I'm going to get rid of all the other apps there. Likewise, I want to make sure that the domain I'm using is not boschlight.com because that's only going to work locally to my environment. As you can see here, this is just going to, I'm just going to use the KF stack that I've provided to my GKE cluster. So I'm going to make sure that when I do the migration, that I'm actually able to build the Spring Music application in the KF cluster environment. So let's quickly zoom past this. As you can tell, this is a video recording so that we can use the power of video speeding up and skipping to get past all of these long steps. So over here, I've just updated my domains and routes to fit the appropriate domains in my GKE cluster. These could, of course, be more enterprise-ready domain names, but I'm using just a very simple, ready-to-go nip.io address that maps to my Ingress Gateway address. Once I'm ready, once that application, that plan has been updated, I would run migrate or kf migrate apply on that plan, and it's going to run through that plan, see if there's any particular issues with it, which I'm particularly going to cancel or ignore for now. Once I go through that plan and this finishes, it will build the application and run it as a Cloud Foundry application, but in Google Kubernetes Engine. While that is happening, I'm also going to run a similar sort of process, but manually. Instead of migrating from Cloud Foundry to GKE, I'm just going to show you how you could normally push an application just like CF push. Instead, we're going to use KF push from a local cloned Git repository with a slightly updated version of that Spring Music app that has a slightly updated CSS that makes it look pretty. So once I do that, I'm going to run kf push. And when I do kf push here, it's just the exact same experience you're used to with CF push. I'm going to provide maybe the name I want to provide that Cloud Foundry app. And it's going to perform all the archiving and uploading and building to run that entire process and create the application. The way this is done in KF processing clusters on GKE, is by leveraging a Tecton pipeline. So you'll see we have Tecton pipelines running in the GKE processing cluster, and that particular, you know, namespace is showing 2 task runs. There are 2 build processes to build the original Spring Music app and the V2 Spring Music app. And so this process took a few minutes. So while we let it build, I'm just going to zoom right past there and show you, while that's happening, what's actually happening is we're building the container images that we're going to be leveraging in Kubernetes, and those container images get sent and stored in Artifact Registry, which is Google Cloud's modern container registry, right on Google Cloud. So this is where it gets stored and pushed automatically, and as we make updates or create new applications, they would all get pushed into Artifact Registry here. So that's where the build is being sent to. I'm going to skip through that really quickly while that gets built. And I'm going to also talk about, if you're familiar with blue-green deployments, you can do a create route and map route, provide weights to the different applications you want to maybe do a blue-green or canary deployment with. And so in here, what I'm doing is I'm creating a music specific host name, so that music.mydomain will route to specifically the Spring Music v1 and Spring Music v2. And I'm going to split that up as originally 90% for v1 and then 10% for v2. And so when I do that, and once the application is up and running, you'll see that it got the 90% for V1 and 10% for V2. V2 is still building and still hasn't been finalized and pushed yet. So when I try to access that music host name and then that route, it's not going to fully resolve the V2 10% of the time. So let's try that out. If I go to this page in particular, not Spring Music, but let's say I go to music.that domain, right? So if I try to hit particularly V2, you'll see that it's still coming up. The app hasn't finished deploying yet, and so it's having some trouble 10% of the time. But once it's finished pushing on the right hand side, we will see that the V2 Spring Music app is ready now. And so now that we've validated that it looks pretty, I like this gradient background CSS update that V2 brings. Let's fully do that blue-green migration. Let's put 100% of our traffic to Spring Music v2. And for those that are familiar with this sort of command line interface, you could simply do the kf map route command now and target all of Spring Music v2 to that particular route, right? So I'm now putting Spring Music v2 100% of the weight. So all traffic now for Spring Music will go to that new colorful version of Spring Music. And I'm gonna stop setting traffic to v1. And so that's very like a basic example of, if you're familiar with CF commands, that's the same sort of experience you're getting in KF, right? It's very much a seamless transition to KF. Now, the last thing I want to show you, if we still have time, and of course, others on the call, please let me know if I'm going way over time. I wanted to show you the ability to now look at, for example, how do we maybe leverage Anthos a little bit more and maybe take advantage of Anthos Service Mesh to visualize and also create alerts and things like that. So right here, what I'm doing is I'm doing an Apache bench command to send 10,000 requests, simulating 30 users at a time, trying to hit this particular endpoint, that music web page or web server. So when I do that, I'm sending traffic, and I should be getting some telemetry details that we can visualize here in Anthos Service Mesh dashboards. So in here, this is something, Anthos Service Mesh is something that we need to leverage when we're using KF clusters. And it is a very nice tool to get those sorts of telemetry details and create alerts and things like that. So in here, you'll see my very basic topology of the Spring Music V2 app. It's going through the Ingress gateway, the Istio Ingress gateway for those that are maybe familiar, and going to hit my Spring Music V2 route, which is that is basically the service itself that is running the app. So when we're talking about Kubernetes terms, there involves a service, a pod, but as a KF user, or rather as a Cloud Foundry user, you're more just interested in the applications and the routes and things like that. But in here, I can use that application that's showing up in Anthos Service Mesh. I can create service level objectives based on things like latency or availability to determine we want to make sure Spring Music is always coming back to us at a latency of 100 milliseconds or less. And over here is an example, right? So I'm doing this in a period of a calendar day, and I want to say, let's have a 95% goal, where 95% of the time we want to be better than or equal to 100 milliseconds every response. So over here, as the Apache bench command runs, I should be getting some telemetry details synced in. So I'm gonna do like a quick refresh here, and you will see that my my telemetry details will eventually get updated. Just give me 1 second here. And so over here, you'll see, okay, yeah, we are getting a lot of traffic from that Apache bench command, and we are currently in the green in terms of our service level objective. And we can use this and create very dynamic service level objectives based on performance, however you would like, to make sure any sort of application or all of your applications are hitting the right level of performance using this Anthos Surface Mesh and the dashboards and things like that. Lastly, there is a piece about creating some notification channels. If you wanted to say notify everyone when Spring Music is taking several thousands of milliseconds or seconds to actually respond to people, we should probably let folks know via email or via the Teams channel or Slack channel that something's wrong with the app and we need to fix it, or the ops people need to fix it. Whoever on the team is responsible will come in and help out. And that's basically it that I want to show you here. And I hope that was very informative. Now, before I pass it over to the next folks, I want to just say, if there's any questions about the demo, I know that was a recording, but I do have the demo running live on my machine here. So if there's any questions or something you want me to show you, please feel free to ask, because I can always bring that up.
Thanks very much, Chris. It was a great demo. I really enjoyed you showing the setting of several service level objectives too, as an additional bonus of using the Anthos platform. I think, Rohit, you wanted to share an experience that customers have using the assessment tool.
Yeah, the magic sauce in the KF tool is that not only does it, of course, help with the runtime, a lot of what Chris showed, but also enterprises like to create project plans around migration, like, right? So it starts typically with an assessment and an inventory of all the application instances, all the build packs of the service instances, and that with the KF, with the assessment part of KF, right, you get that complete environment inventory of build packs, client libraries, right, stacks, backing services. I think that's critical as a starting point to craft your migration plan, right? And so that it gives you an excellent starting point once you create the assessment to then create, essentially create a plan to, so I look at it in three phases: the prep part, preparation, which the KF assessment helps, and then comes the actual migration with KF, where you typically are provisioning the landing zone on GKE or Anthos, and then you're deploying where you're typically extending PCF routing to KF, you are adding KF to the CI continuous integration pipeline, and then you're doing a KF push in your Jenkins or whatever CI pipelines, and then you create a promotion process to prod, and then eventually you might want to keep them running with KF, or you may want to turn down PCF depending on how you how what your long term strategy is. So the point I wanted to convey is that it's a journey, and we have helped multiple customers go through this journey. It's not just we look at all aspects of it. It's the preparation, the migration, which involves provisioning and deployment, and then day two operations, which might involve staying with uh, sunsetting some of the PCF apps, draining all the PCF apps eventually to KF, and then decommissioning PCF or TAS as you see fit.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rohit. And next, I wanted to introduce Ron. Tell us a little bit about Softchoice, your role there, and why you're excited about the Pivotal Cloud Foundry to Anthos journey for your customers.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michael. So Softchoice has been around for 30 years, primarily as a value-added reseller that recently has gone into advanced solution offerings and services, and proud to be partnered with both Google as an NSP, one of the only ones out there, and certainly with Arctiq and working with this group. When we start talking about enterprise having 92% of them having a multi-cloud strategy and 82% having a hybrid strategy, those are big numbers, and I feel like the path to get there is often overlooked, and having the right partners to get there is underestimated. And so I really get excited and have been excited about Anthos from the day it was released because of the promises that it brings. And I was also excited about PCF when it was released, right? But I was also excited when my Apple IIe was released back when I was 11 and 12 years old. And times change, right? Nobody takes a horse and buggy to work anymore. And so as times change, we have to adapt. And so here we are with Anthos. And so it is an exciting time. And I think it's a great time to be in technology. And specifically when we start trying to get past the limitations of what people think cloud might be or vendor lock, I think the solution really opens the doors for a lot of folks on the call.
That's fantastic, and I'm really glad to be in partnership with Softchoice and Google. Here at Arctiq, we have been working with a lot of customers implementing Anthos in their environment, enabling a hybrid cloud journey, both in a multi-cloud scenario on premises, and really showing our customers how to use the software to their advantage to automate the management of fleets at scale. And we've had a number of great successes and would like to see more customers make this journey from PCF to Anthos. And we're here to help, and we can help you with this KF journey along the way. With that, I think we had this period of time set aside to answer any questions that might come in from the audience. And if there are none coming in right away, what we can do is just talk about a couple of different ideas. Ron, I think you already explained, the fact that times change, techniques change, and we're adopting new patterns in order to keep up with today. There was a question that was posed a little while back about what migrations look like at scale. Rohit, you talked about that a little bit, about doing the plan ahead of time, understanding the landscape, putting together the roadmap. And I was wondering, were there any other ideas that you'd like to share about how that program happens at scale when maybe a customer has hundreds or thousands of apps to migrate? What have you seen from the multitude of Google customers that have made that journey?
Is this for Ron or for me, Michael?
Sorry, this one was for you, Rohit, because I
Okay,
know
yeah.
that
Sorry.
you had shared some information about the journey that it
Yeah,
takes
yeah.
to
I
make, and
can
I was
give.
curious about customers that have done this at scale. What does that experience look like, and what are some of the lessons that you've seen learned along the way?
Yeah, I think the lesson learned along the way is, um, first, just typical principles of agile. One is you want to start small, right? You want to pick an initial set of applications that are a representative set of your bigger set of apps, and then once you migrate like the first 5 or the first 10 that are representative of your bigger set, then you create the plan and the CI pipelines and the automation to scale the rest. So in summary, starting small, taking both the developers and the platform engineers and the SRE folks together and crafting a joint plan, showing the initial success for the top 10 types of applications, and then scaling and then building a program at scale. I think those are like the key lessons learned from other customers that have gone on a similar journey. I think starting, not over analyzing it, but using the assessment to inform your migration plan, to then achieve success.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Ron, when we talk about customers making the move, there are some drivers behind that. What are some of the drivers that you're seeing in the field when you're talking to your customers about this type of migration? We've got maybe some dollar cost savings, total cost of ownership. What are you seeing out there?
I think it's certainly always about money, right? Especially when people say it's not. So we do have to consider that, but I think it really gets down to value, and value comes from modernization and being at the. Everyone wants to be in the lead as a company and in business, right? And certainly potentially in your personal lives as well, for that matter. But I think the value can be categorized into a couple of things. One is we don't want to burn dollars in a budget on technology that may be sunset, or where resources are become more and more pricey because the it's not the mainstream technology perhaps. So I think that where we're seeing folks look to migrate is the cost of license, and the cost of resource, but also the cost of value and time to market as we start to talk about containerizing applications and what have you, and then having to run something that maybe is less modern in parallel. You end up with fissures in your IT departments, and I think that getting on one page, if you will, with Anthos really enables you for the future.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think a number of conversations that we're having with our customers are all about automation first, cloud first, taking advantage of modern software architectures, and accelerating that time to market, and doing this in specific service of I think the term is the 4 key metrics, right? Reducing that cycle time between idea and being present in market, reducing your error rates, and reducing the time it takes for you to recover from problems. And it's a pretty incredible journey, I think, moving over to not only the Kubernetes platform, which many people have already started that journey, but then also adopting the other features of the Google Cloud experience. Anthos ties in with not only the Anthos Config Manager and Anthos Service Mesh, but also the Cloud Operations Suite with monitoring and logging and alerting. And you can really create some pretty incredible value very, very quickly.
I think another point I want to make is like from a CIO perspective, right? Like and even the CFO perspective, they care about cost, right? They care about risk. Um, Honestly, going with KF reduces risk, right? It reduces the risk of keeping this older open source tech stack that is not really being updated. And so reduction of risk is one of the core reasons you could pick this. Another vector is cost. um, you are if you just double down on Kubernetes or GKE, you can rationalize your cost structure. You no longer are tied to a commercial distribution of Cloud Foundry. You can rebase all your applications using KF on top of GKE. So it eliminates cost, it reduces risk, and it keeps the same developer experience and helps you improve uh, customer experience for your customers. So overall, it's a win-win proposition, and serves a very critical customer need.
And Rohit, I think you hit on a really good point there, is that as you save those dollars, we can start to apply those dollars into more advanced solutions, deep dive data analytics, AI, ML implementations, what have you, to really expand upon that customer experience. But we do have a question from our audience. And Rohit, I'm going to direct this toward you around introducing KF to your environment. It says, wouldn't add complexity and another component to keep maintaining. And I think what the comment is geared toward is, can you talk a little bit about maybe the standardization on with KF and how that reduces complexity and what the migration path might look like?
Yeah, I think KF kind of serves multiple needs, right? Um, whenever whenever you modernize existing systems, or a legacy system, you always have to apply a facade or a layer of abstraction to then introduce the newer system underneath that facade. So the way I think about KF is that it provides that facade, not so much as an additional component, but that compatibility layer that allows your applications to then move over to a more modern runtime. Um, and then if when as you use that facade or abstraction, once you have completely moved over, you could choose to keep using that abstraction, or in the future you could choose to move all your applications entirely to Kubernetes, and not have them use any of the Cloud Foundry or Cloud Controller APIs, and eventually you could stop using KF. So think of it as that on ramp, and once you have completely moved across to a Kubernetes based runtime, you no longer even need KF. But I think it serves a dual purpose when you coexist in both a PCF, in a Cloud Foundry, and a Kubernetes based runtime. So yes, it does add complexity, a little bit of a complexity, with a lot of value in the interim, and in the future you could choose to stay with it, or you could completely even sunset KF and go to a complete native Kubernetes development paradigm.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Kind of going on that thread, how long would it take typically? And I know this is a bit of a loaded question, so I'll pose it to the group. How long do we think a typical, air quotes around typical migration from CF to GKE/Anthos might take? And what should be considered as you go down that road? And Rohit, maybe we'll start with you since you had the mic, and MK will go to you next.
Yeah, I mean, as in all things in consulting, the answer depends. What I would say is, uh, I think the initial 4 or 5 applications that probably represent the all the stereotypes. I mean, the way I would do this, I would bucketize all your Cloud Foundry applications and see what are the large categories of the buckets. Pick one from each bucket and migrate them using KF. And then once you do that, I think the rest of it just fall into that pipeline. I think a project like this could take anywhere, for your entire estate, it could take maybe 4 to 6 weeks, or even 10 weeks, if you put a focus team of 3 to 4 engineers on it. Um, it's hard to give an estimate, but KF significantly accelerates the entire motion. And once you do the first 4 or 5, I think the rest just fall in line as part of automation.
Perfect. Michael?
Yeah, I was going to say we do POCs for this for customers within 6 or 7 weeks, where we can set up the environment and set up everything that needs to happen, select some target applications and get them running on the KF environment. It varies by customer. Different customers have different governance requirements and things that make projects move quickly or maybe not as quickly. But we can show value in a very short period of time. And for the larger customers that have many applications to move over time, exactly as Rohit described, you organize yourself into buckets, understand what you're dealing with. That KF assessment will tell you where all of your complexity lies. Many of the vanilla ones can move without being modified at all, and the ones that require more attention, that's where you focus some resources and efforts and you get going. But as I was saying, Ron, we can begin to show value in a very short period of time.
Yeah, and I think from my side of the equation, working in concert with you, we like to start at the assessment phase, as Rohit mentioned early in the presentation, and really get in and maybe add a couple of days to the front end. So let's call it a week to be safe. So I think, Michael, we could be safe in getting some quick and dirty results within 8 weeks if we'd set a week's worth of assessment and then 7 weeks of POC and getting that up and going. And then we answer the question of depends at the end of that, right? And what everyone's individual timelines look like.
Yeah. Some of our largest customers have very large estates that require a lot of planning and complex change management across many groups. And for those customers, the planning might be on the order of months, but it really does depend. And I like that you pointed out, Rohit, in all things consulting, it's measured by that.
Yeah, and it's just like the flip point to that is like it's very easy to get started. Any developer can get a $300 credit for GCP, spin up Anthos, get access to KF, and then migrate a small Cloud Foundry application using KF on Anthos with GCP credits, right? Play with it on your own, right? Validate it, and then I think propose a plan to your organization, and then you can bring in a partner like Arctiq and Softchoice who have done it at scale. But it's very easy to validate how good the solution is. As a developer and architect, you always want to try it out first. So I think the option will always exist with GCP credits and leveraging KF with Spring Music. You could run the same demo that Chris did and see for yourself the value of the tool.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you for that finer point. So Jose, thank you. We appreciate the comments. Keep them coming. He has another question here. So if you are able to deploy your apps into a PCF platform, what would you require to have in a GKE-based environment to deploy the same applications? Would you be able to do this without KF? And so, Michael, why don't you take this one first, and we'll let Rohit add commentary.
Yeah,
I was going to say the KF is intended to assist you with that migration, and deploying without KF is a refactoring, making sure that you don't have a reliance on the various build packs that are required. And Chris, I was wondering if you could add additional comment there, and we'll pass to Rohit for his.
Yeah, absolutely. So great follow-up question. I do believe that when you're dealing with KF, or why do we even want to deploy to KF in the first place if we can do everything in Cloud Foundry? Well, for one, if you're planning or trying to get off of that platform because of legacy reasons or lack of support or budget, whatever it had be, you coming over to KF, there will be potentially some limitations. For example, if you are using non-cloud native build packs or some stacks that maybe you've developed in-house, you would want to make sure that the build packs and all the content that you're using is something you can do with the V2 or the V3 cloud native build packs. And now when you're trying to bring it over into KF, or why even use KF, you do probably want, or your organization may want, something that has a little bit more scalability, which is something that Kubernetes, specifically managed Kubernetes like GKE and Anthos clusters, do give you, whereas you maybe don't get as much of that in the traditional Cloud Foundry or even Bosch environment. So being able to transition to a more scalable platform such as Kubernetes Engine or any Kubernetes environment, really, but then also keeping that developer experience of CF commands, so that developers still feel comfortable with the transition, but then having the operators and people working on the platform itself understanding the changes and what differences are to come with Kubernetes, and building on top of that. So you are playing a little bit of a learning curve, trying to understand the differences and nuances that come with KF, but then you can also take advantage of what Kubernetes has to offer. And I think I'll pass it over to you, Rohit, if you want to build on top of that.
Yeah, so like my answer is simpler. You, you developers adopted Cloud Foundry for a reason, right? You wanted a quick, efficient way to take your source code and to run it in the cloud, and you don't really care how you did that. Um, cloud Cloud Foundry, with its concept of build packs, allowed you to take your source code, package it up into a container, and then deploy that container in. You operate it at the level of source code. So if you want to have the same Cloud Foundry type experience, and you have the source code, you could potentially use Cloud Run and gcloud deploy with Cloud Run, and Cloud Run supports build packs too, Cloud Foundry style build packs from buildpacks.io. And so you could essentially, if you did not want to use Cloud Foundry, but with minimal disruption, start from your source code and then use the same build packs that you had, that you leveraged earlier, or the build packs v3, and use Cloud Run to then build a source code like Cloud Foundry did with build packs and deploy it. So I think that's certainly an option on the development side. Is if you don't want to use KF, you can just use the Cloud Run with and Cloud Run supports build packs. That's the one way to go. The second thing is, if you don't want to make any changes whatsoever to your application or to your manifest files or to your CI runtimes, then KF is an excellent option because it provides that compatibility layer on top of Cloud Controller APIs. And then the third part is, if you want the complete managed experience at the infrastructure layer, we have GKE or even GKE Autopilot, where you don't really have to worry about the underlying worker nodes or master nodes. Autopilot takes care of all that for you, and you just deploy KF on top of that. So there is definitely a lot of stuff for developers and for operators and platform engineers for GCP, with kind of multiple pathways for your Cloud Foundry apps and Cloud Foundry style of development. Sorry, long
Thank you.
answer, but yeah.
So it looks like we answered Jose's question. So Jose, again, we appreciate the commentary and jumping in. Is there anyone else? We'll give it just a couple of seconds to see if anyone else pops up. But Michael, I'll keep an eye on the chat, but I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and if we don't have any more questions from the chat, I think we can wrap up the session. And let's just talk a little bit about, next steps. If you're interested in exploring the PCF to Anthos journey, we really want to hear from you. We've got a team waiting to help you. We can start with a POC or even talk about bigger plans. The recognizing value from this kind of engagement happens quickly. We can help you start the journey through doing quick TCO calculations and planning out what a POC might look like, to performing that POC and demonstrating that your software will indeed work migrated to Anthos using KF. And then, after today's call, we're going to be sending out a feedback form to registered attendees. And if you want to hear more, if you want to talk to us about it, let us know. And were there any other comments in the chat? No?
No.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. Ron, Rohit, Chris, thank you so much for joining this session today. And with that, I think we are concluded. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.